Welcome, everyone, to another Driving and Dragons. We've got a fresh series for you today. I hope to make this an ongoing series on Mondays, but we'll have to see how this plays out. We are all plagued by a mutant infection of truly puzzling stupidity in this hobby. If you get on X, or God forbid Reddit, or simply pay attention to some of the industry news in the TTRPG hobby, you will see people say and do some of the absolute most idiotic things imaginable. Now, this could be dangerous for my channel. Those who have interacted with me for any length of time know that I call balls and strikes. I don't play favorites. The basic expert was in my comments praising me for my level-headed commentary and fair approach to one of his bouts of drama, only to be blocking me on X while he cried on YouTube because I called him out a week later for failing to adhere to his own definition of the mythical underworld topic and the bad faith tactics he used in that exchange. I am certain that some of his faithful followers unsubbed, thumbs down, blocked my channel shortly thereafter. I also have had more than my fair share of run-ins with the infamous Bro SR, and while I fundamentally agreed with them far more often than not, it's internet world, and it's kind of an all or nothing thing when it comes to people's fan bases. I have no doubt that people I have great respect for, like Diversity and Dragons, RPG Pundit, Black Lodge Games, Professor DM, Luke over at DM's Lair, and any number of smaller guys like me, are actually going to land up on this list at some point. So, here's hoping that I don't systemically and systematically alienate the entire tabletop role-playing game universe in this fun little drama mockery series. As a side note, I struggled with the idea of putting a mouthpiece in and doing this entire video as the mush-mouthed parody character Chess Pigeon GM, but I honestly don't want that guy getting any extra views, even if it's just from people trying to see who's being mocked for context. Trust me, we will hear more than enough of his nonsense on this series anyway, because when it comes to saying stupid shit, Clown Door kinda has the market cornered. For now, take a second to drop down into the comments and tell me what you think the lowest IQ hot take in TTRPGs was here in the recent history. So, without further ado, here is the first edition of Intelligence as a Dump Stat. Thanks and credit to Aaron Lind over on the excellent Elven Maid in Discord for the idea to call it that. So luckily for me, the top candidate this week in Stupid is both a safe target and one that I have a feeling will be a frequent flyer on this airline of ignorance. Woke tards of the coast themselves. Wizards put out their new monster manual, and holy Jesus have they managed to fuck up the one book you would think that they could not possibly cause controversy with. It's a book of opponents that can be put into combat encounters. For decades, even player races other than human have been included, such as elves, dwarves, halflings, and gnomes, all appearing in the 3.5 monster manual. It has also included good, evil, neutral, friendly, helpful, and adversarial creatures, along with any other disposition you can think of. Since time immemorial, there's absolutely no implications made about a being's intelligence, character, moral qualities, or social values simply by being in the monster manual. You may as well call it the not human manual. So how did the woke wizards manage to find things to virtue signal on here? Well, for starters, they pulled out the orcs from the monster manual. That's right, orcs. Since they were falsely labeled as stand-ins for black people, then converted into a caricature of Mexican people, Wizards removed the monster whose name literally comes from Ortnias, the Old English word for monsters, from the monster manual, because they are the only people in the universe who are so race-obsessed to think that monster equals black. That's right. And another classic example of being so obsessed with racism that you become a sort of racism Ouroboros that circles back around to helping minorities by insisting that they need separate schools, books, bathrooms, and drinking fountains. Wizards of the Coast is once again being incredibly racist by trying to be anti-racist in their monster manual. But it doesn't stop there. There's one very real monster that they made sure to include, and that is the inclusivity demon. They are so sensitive and desperate to quote unquote include everyone and to respect every culture that they promptly drop trowel and take a massive dump on several cultures in the process. Since sex and gender absolutely cannot exist, while simultaneously everything can be all sexes and genders, or none at all for the purposes of making sure that people who live in a fantasy world regarding sex and gender can also have their fantasy game character live in a fantasy world regarding sex and gender, and then have imaginary fantasy world sex with fantasy game monsters without somehow offending the players themselves regarding their real world fantasy sex and gender. Wizards of the Coast has made a Russian nesting doll of retarded cultural deconstruction and simple ignorance of how language works just by performing gender mutilation surgery on the succubus, the sphinx, the Rakshasa, and the dryad, to name the most popular targets for their degeneracy. To start with the least offensive and simply stupid is the succubi. The succubus can take any form it likes, but it is distinctly the female version of the demon. We don't need male succubus because the incubus exists. What's an incubus, you ask? It's literally a male succubus. Regardless of the form it takes, it seduces men to drain their life energy. It is the female, and it's a succubus. If it does the same thing to women, it is the male, and it's an incubus. Not only does the male succubus already exist, you'd think this vile demon would already give them everything that they want. They got rid of alignment, and their bullshit moral relativism already says good and evil don't really exist and only matter to the observer. So here you go, a creature that is always a woman, regardless of the appearance, regardless of their genitals. In fact, it can go back and forth from twig and berries to peaches and cream, while still always being a woman, regardless of the kind of man it wants to have sex with. And it has a counterpart that does the same thing while boinking women. They have to change it because it came from before present day and therefore must be unenlightened and wrong in the eyes of the party. I mean, the eyes of Big Brother. Damn it, I mean Wizards of the Coast. It only gets worse from there. Let's take the Sphinx. Here's another mythical creature that already has an opposite gender version, the Androsphinx. But no, WotC can't leave well enough alone. Gotta get rid of that gendered language. And while they're at it, let's remove the phylactery from the liches to avoid offending religious Jews that almost certainly don't know or care, since they don't actually use the term phylactery. They use, I think it's called a tefillin. Of course, that's like removing prayer to avoid offending one religion while ignoring all the other religions that also use it. Maybe we should remove books. They should take books away from Dungeons and Dragons, since many religions write things on paper. Speaking of, let's touch on the Rakshasa. Now, there are some making hay of the Hindu religious aspect, but D&D Rakshasas were never really based on Hinduism, at least not physically. They're based on a description from an old TV show. That's where the backward hands and the tiger head comes from. The Hindu myths are where you get the drinking from human skulls, the shape-shifting, and the general evil bastardry. Wizards has just decided that they need to be furries. Leave them in the same terms when it comes to stat block and strip away everything else that makes them simply powerful, magical, animal-headed people. That's all a Rakshasa is now. All of the actual Hindu mysticism has been stripped away, and they literally chose to focus on the American 70s TV show that they pulled the original description from back in the Gary Gygax days. Way to go, Wizards of the Coast. You had two ways you could go. Follow the Hindu mysticism, honor the culture, or follow the one part of the Rakshasa that was not actually based on Hinduism? And which one did you pick? The one that allows furry sex. There have been so many other incredibly stupid things said here recently. But for this first edition, I have to leave it all on the Sultans of Stupid from Seattle, Wizards of the Coast. You have clearly used intelligence as your dump stat for a very long time. Please sell the IP. You clearly don't know how to care for it. I wish that was all the rampant stupidity that we've recently witnessed in the hobby, but I think it's safe to say that Wizards of the Coast pretty much takes the cake this week, despite everything else that was there. As a palate cleanser to send us off today, I am going to touch on two more pieces of idiocy that achieved notice by me in the past week or so. These two define flip sides of the same coin. On one side of the coin is the ultra-leftist, idiotically woke Jason Bulmahn, who, on the other hand, it's Jeffro Johnson, the legitimately alt-right Confederate apologist figurehead and founder of the Pro-SR. What did these two do? Well, a while back, Jason Bulmahn called the then vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance a fascist and said that neither him nor any of the nearly 78 million Trump supporters were welcome at his table and that they should return their Pathfinder books because he didn't want them playing his game. It's a bold move from the guy who was a distant second place to Wizards of the Coast, and that until now had kind of slid under the radar. How to kill your company's biggest opportunity in over a decade with one post is what should be his next book, because D&D's putting out a very unpopular edition, as we spent the rest of this video covering. Here's Pathfinder 2nd edition, i.e. 4th edition with a new coat of paint on it. Here's their chance to slide in and take that market share, and he's going to blow it by pissing off a big chunk of the base. As for old Jeffro, well, he has recently decided to run off at the mouth, saying that J.R.R. Tolkien ruined fantasy by creating the modern fantasy genre, and he has decided that he wants to repeatedly try to step to Sandy Peterson and inform him that he doesn't know anything about games or how to design them. That's Sandy Peterson, the guy who definitely didn't have any hand in designing games like Call of Cthulhu and Doom and Quake and Age of Empires and Civilization and a whole shitload of others. But what do Jeffro and Jason have in common? Well, two things. Technically three things, because they both start with a J. But two things. Neither one of them have ever created or developed a damn thing. They have simply copied the text from D&D rulebooks and then claimed the genius of other people for themselves. And the second thing is that intelligence is apparently their dump stat. That's all I've got today. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.